Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Now before I jump into the CRX build, I've got a few packages to open up that I've received in the mail. The first one that I'm going to open up actually has to do with the 4-door work car here. I know you guys haven't seen this thing in a while. I haven't really done any work on it. I've just been driving it to work and back. But I've got a new part for it, and I'm going to show you what it is. Well, this looks kind of familiar. Now, you've seen in a previous video where I installed the max speeding rod's power chamber intake, but the actual power chamber intake portion was made out of plastic. So I was doing some browsing on Max Speeding Rod's website, and I came across the same intake, but the power chamber portion is actually made of a real carbon fiber. So this was only about $100 for the whole intake system. Now, I've already got this intake system on my car, so I'm not going to use the extra components that I'm going to pull off, or actually that I pulled out of the box. So I'm going to jump in here and just get this power chamber swapped out, and I'll show you how easy it is. Well, about 60 seconds later, and this intake is installed. Now, since I had the other one in there, it was just a quick one-for-one, just a couple of screws to loosen up the clamps that hold that thing on. I really didn't have to upgrade it from the plastic one that was in there, but I just like the look of the carbon fiber. And then I ran across it on Max Speeding Rod's website. I was looking through the Honda section, seeing what all they had available, and I saw that, and it reminded me of the old school Password JDM intake, and I'm like, I'm gonna go ahead and get that. So I picked it up. And I like the way it looks in here. And it's really just a cosmetic change. It's not going to be much performance gain, really zero performance gain coming from that plastic one. But I do like how it looks. So if that's something that you are interested in picking up, I'm going to leave a link down in the description below to Max Speeding Rod's website so you can scoop one up. Now, before I jump into the CRX, I've got a couple more boxes over here that we're going to open up, and I'll show you what I've got. Alright, I'm going to give a huge shout out to Ben over at Resto Tuner. I've been following him for a while and he's been slowly expanding his product line, and I really love what he's doing. A lot of these parts are basically impossible to find now if you're doing a restoration on a CRX or a Civic or any of those golden era Hondas, mid-90s. I know he's expanding to S2000s, other items like that, or other cars like that, but the CRX seems to be where he started, and that's good for me because that's the cars that I'm going to be needing these parts for. I did show these parts in more detail, and they are things like the timing belt cover, the decal that goes on it that shows the timing belt interval. It's got the air filter box sticker that shows you how often you're supposed to change that air filter. The fuel tank, the fuse box, the interior decals. A lot of these things get faded and they peel up and they get just brittle over time, and you can't replace them, but now you can. Definitely go check him out, Resto Tuner on Instagram. Go check his website out. Tons of awesome products. One that I especially like is the taillight gaskets. These are like almost the OE material taillight gaskets. You basically cannot find these, and they definitely wear out and they leak through. So this is amazing. It's got the OE cutouts with the screw holes or the bolt holes. That's awesome. So he also sent me over a bolt kit for the engine bay. These are the strut tower nuts. These are the various 10mm head M6 bolts that go in the engine bay to really dress it up. And these right here are pretty hard to find. The M6 by 28mm wiper motor bolts. That's something that I ran across on mine that I was wanting to replace, and I really couldn't source them. I know I showed you in a previous video some replacement zinc coated bolts that I picked up on Amazon. Well, compared to these are OE, definitely OE finish on these. The ones that I had picked up are really bright yellow. They're still really nice bolts, but they do not compare to what Ben is offering over at Resto Tuner for your engine bay. That's the OE finish there. It's not so bright gold like the other ones that I've got. So check him out. He's supporting my channel, and I think we ought to support him as well. That way he can continue to expand his product line and keep offering us really nice products. Alright, I'm sure you probably guessed it, but I did pick up a clutch and a flywheel off of Rock Auto for the car. I was going to resurface the flywheel that was on the car, but for the amount of trouble and the cost to have the thing resurfaced, I actually could pick up a new one. So this thing was maybe like 40 bucks, less than 40 bucks I think. Altogether it was under 100 bucks, or maybe just over 100 bucks. I don't really remember, but I would say 100 bucks is a pretty good deal for new parts here. So that's going to allow me to jump back into the CRX project and hopefully get that transmission put on. So my next step is going to be to clean that transmission up a little bit. I'm going to spray it off, try to degrease it a little bit, and then we're going to try to get this thing assembled and put back together. So let's do it. Alright, we got most of the grease off of this. There was quite a bit inside here in the bell housing. I don't know if it's from this seal here at the axle or what it's from. Most likely it's from this. But that's going to be good enough for right now because we're going to have to pull this all back apart anyway. I was just wanting to clean it up so it's a little bit easier to handle. So let's go ahead and jump over to the car and I'll show you what I'm going to pull off. Alright, I'm going to pull this flywheel off of here, but big shout out to Brady or GE Builds. He was watching my video and he noticed that these flywheel bolts are actually automatic transmission bolts. So these bolts are a little bit shorter, at least some of them. Not all of them are. I think there's a couple of them that might be just manual transmission bolts. But the automatic transmission flywheel bolts are actually a little bit shorter, so they may not bite in as much as they need to. So good thing we saw that, and hopefully I've got some over in my bolt box. We'll check in just a second, but let's get this thing pulled off right now. Alright, as you can see, this flywheel has seen better days. Luckily, I've got another one to replace this one with. And as you saw, the bolts that were in there was one manual transmission flywheel bolt, and the rest of them were automatic transmission. And as you saw, the manual transmission is longer than the automatic. So the previous owner was definitely taking a risk by running these because the flywheel for the manual transmission is thicker. So it definitely requires longer bolts. So I went through my bolt bin, and I do have some new flywheel bolts that are for the manual transmission, so they are the long ones as well. So I'm going to be using these on the new one, and I'm going to get rid of these because I don't want them getting mixed up and getting thrown on an engine kind of like what he did. So let's get the new flywheel opened up and get the pilot bearing put in, and we'll see about getting it bolted up and torqued down. Alright, with it cleaned off with the brake clean, got the grease cleaned off of there, we can take our pilot bearing and get this thing put on the car. Alright, we're going to torque them to 87 pound-feet in this order here. It's a crisscross pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I may end up having to hold the flywheel to keep this from rotating. We're going to see. Alright, with the flywheel torqued down, we're ready to put the clutch and pressure plate on. I'm going to spray this pressure plate off the mating surface with some brake cleaner. Get it cleaned off. Make sure there's no grease on it, because that's where the clutch needs to make contact with and create friction. Okay, with that cleaned off, we need to make sure we put the clutch on facing the right way. This one actually says flywheel side, so it needs to be flipped around that way. And it's going to go against the flywheel. Now it comes with a clutch alignment tool. You want to put the clutch alignment tool in the clutch, put it through here, and basically line it up with the pilot bearing. That's going to go, this will actually go into the pilot bearing and it will center your clutch up. Now we're going to put these bolts in here, and these are actually going to be torqued down to 19 pound-feet. Alright, the next move here is to pull out this throwout bearing and replace it with the new one. To do that, we need to take out this 12mm bolt here, and we're going to slide this mechanism rod out. Alright, we're going to unhook the spring here, try to keep it in place. Take the old one out, the new one back, hook the spring back up, like that. I'm going to wipe this down. Now I'm going to use some of this grease here that came with it to lubricate this here. Should be ready to go. Alright, it is the next day here. I was struggling yesterday with that transmission. I was trying to use a jack and balance it on there and get it actually up to the engine and get it put on there, but just the weight of it, the awkwardness of it, and the tight space over here, I wasn't able to do that. I'm going to try a little bit different technique today. I'm going to use my engine hoist just to help hold the transmission in place. That way I can get it, the splines lined up and the thing actually pushed on there and bolted up. Hopefully it'll go a little bit better today and we'll be able to get this transmission put on. Alright, well, it took a little bit of a finesse, and I had to pull the distributor off because this strap was hitting it and it was keeping the transmission from going all the way on. So now I'm going to get some bolts put in and hopefully get this thing pulled all the way against the engine. Alright, the transmission, clutch, and flywheel are installed. It took a little bit longer than I was thinking it was going to take, but we did get it on there, so that's a good thing. It's slow progress, but it is progress. I've still got some things to button up in here, like the distributor, the rear transmission mount, or engine mount, whatever you want to call it, and the front transmission mount. But I don't think I'm going to put the front transmission mount on, because really the goal here is just to get this thing drivable. That way I can drive it down to the DMV and get an inspection. I've still got quite a bit of work before that happens. I've got headlights to get working. I've got to make sure the whole electrical system is up to par. The fuel system, spark plugs, all that stuff I'm going to have to go through before I crank this over for the first start. I really don't want to just crank it over. I've noticed some things that are loose. It's almost as if they took the whole suspension apart, but they didn't actually bolt it all back up. It's just kind of halfway bolted up just to hold it together. So I'm going to have to really give everything a once over before I get this thing on the road. So one thing I noticed was this is not a D16A6. This has been swapped. This is a ZC, a single overhead cam engine. So I wasn't aware of that. I didn't really look close enough. I just kind of glanced at it and thought, hey, that's the A6, but it's actually a ZC. They're essentially the same motor, but it has been swapped. So that's just something for me to note in the future in case there are parts that are a little bit different. So I'm going to wrap it up here for today's video. I know it was a little segmented, pieces here and there, having some problems, but that's just part of the game here as we rebuild this CRX. So I'll catch you on the next episode, and I hope you join me.